I would like to share a little bit information about the voting process.
Okay. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today is 13th of June, 2022. Dear members of Dissertation Council, in accordance with the order of Chairman of the Board, Rector of Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, number 306, dated June 28, 2021, changes and addition made by order of the Rector number 82, dated 11/03/2022, the permanent staff, the Dissertation Council for the Direction of Study, 8D041, Business and Management, approved in the amount of 6 permanent members of the Dissertation Council, and in accordance with the protocol number 12 of May 2022, approved in the amount of 6 temporary members. At today's meeting, there are 12 members of the board, including 6 people specializing in independent dissertation. So, permanent members: Turgenbayeva Ардак Несипековна, chairperson; Muhamedi Bulat Mentaevich, deputy chairperson; Кожахметова Асель Кушербаевна, academic secretary; Цагиева Рима Калмбековна is present; Алибекова Гульнар Жанатовна is present; Дубина Игорь Николаевич; and temporary members: Leonid Polishchuk, professor, PhD in economics, National Research University, High School of Economics, Moscow, Russian Federation, is present.
Hello, thanks.
Umar Nawaz Kayani, PhD, Associate Professor, College of Business Administration, Al-Falah University, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Mary El Badri, PhD, Associate Professor, University of Mediven.
Karbaz University.
Yes, Karpasi, Nicosia, Republic of Cyprus.
Yes, Cyprus. Yes.
Okay. Next, Nurmagomedova Ажар Зинулаевна, candidate of Economic Sciences, PhD, Associate Professor, Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, Almaty, Republic of Kazakhstan. Imramzieva Munira Yalkunovna, PhD, Associate Professor, Caspian Public University, Almaty, Republic of Kazakhstan. And Harun Khan, PhD, Associate Professor, University of Wollongong, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So there are 12 members of the Dissertation Council today. This member of participants is sufficient for a quorum. Let me start the meeting with the Dissertation Council. I declare the meeting of the Dissertation Council open. On the agenda is the defense of the dissertation work by Kaliyev Kalizhan Sagatbekovich on the topic analysis of bank risk and performance across transitional economies on the specialty 6D 900 Finance. The dissertation is submitted for the first time. Domestic Scientific Consultant, PhD, Associate Professor, Chair of Finance and Accounting Department, Bank College of Business of KIMEP University, Mira Nurmakhanova, and Foreign Scientific Consultant, PhD, Professor of Finance and Dean of BRSC Business School, BRSC University, Sankun Lee, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Official reviewers, Doshan Raygul Dukenbayqızı, PhD, Associate Professor, Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, Almaty, Kazakhstan, and Nurgazina Asil Muratovna, PhD, Associate Professor, Director of International Cooperation Department, Almaty Management University, Almaty, Kazakhstan. A domestic scientific consultant is present. Positive reviews from domestic and foreign scientific consultants are available. Official reviewers are present. Do the dissertation council members have any comments on the agenda?
No comment.
No comment. There is a proposal to approve the agenda. Please give your votes. For. Who for? Dear colleagues, please give your votes. For 12, against 0, abstained 0. The agenda is approved unanimously. The vote for presenting the personal documents of the applicant is given to Academic Secretary of the Dissertation Council, PhD, Kurahmetova Asil Kusherbayevna, please.
Thank you, Ardakhni Spekna. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, let me start. Kaliyev Kalijan Sagatbekovich, Kazakh, was born in 1988. He studied for a bachelor degree from 2005 to 2009 and graduated from the magistracy in 2012. He studied for a doctoral degree in finance at the Department of Accounting and Finance of KIMEP University from 2018 to 2021. The dissertation work of Kaliyev Kalijan on the topic of analysis of bank risks and performance across transitional economies was approved at the meeting of the Academic Council of the KIMEP University on 31st of October 2018, Order 6, and recommended to the defense after an unanimous decision that was made based on the positive reviews of reviewers, Associate Professor PhD Nurmakhanova and Professor PhD Lee at the extended meeting of the Department of Finance and Accounting of the KIMEP University by protocol number 7, dated December 17, 2021. Based on the materials of the dissertation work, 10 papers were published, 4 of them in journals included in the international database Scopus, 4 papers in scientific journals recommended by the Committee for Quality Assurance in the field of Education and Science of the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan, including 2 papers in international journals, which are included in the Web of Science database, with one of them in Proceedings book. All works were presented at international scientific and practical conferences. He began his career as a specialist in the Bank Business Development Department in HSBC Bank Kazakhstan, covering all layers of bank business modeling structures, from specialists to management position of RBWM, corporate and treasury business. Since 2018, he works as a head manager of the Treasury Department of Alten Bank. So in the personal file of the applicant, there are all necessary documents submitted in accordance with the regulation of the Committee for Quality Assurance in the field of education and science of the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan. The submitted materials meet the established requirements for the preparation of a dissertation for the defense of the Committee for Quality Assurance in the field of education and science of the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Defense is allowed. Thank you for your attention. Any questions, please? Inspector?
Do you have any questions to the secretary regarding the personal file of applicant?
Thanks, I have none. It's very clear.
Okay.
I can present, sorry, Ardagh Inspector, sorry, I can present title of papers if you want. Let me do this.
Okay, please.
The list of publication. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
And what about
Yep.
now?
Yeah, it's now
Yes,
clear.
yes.
It's very visible. I
Yes.
see it here.
Okay. And now you can see the list of publications. As I said before, there are totally 10 publications in journals indexed in Scopus and Web of Science database. So, let me close it. Thank you, Ardagh Inspector, please.
Okay, if no questions, please, the floor is given to the applicant for the presentation of main content of dissertation work. Please remember the time limit of 20 minutes.
Well,
Thanks so much.
if I may, just a quick question. If you can please describe the procedure of this defense, what segments, what is the protocol, what to expect. So the first is Mr. Kaliyev will present his work, I understand that, and what will happen next. Can you explain the sequence?
Sorry, you are asking about the procedure, yes? And now,
yeah, if you will, what is the order of presentations, who is going to speak at what point, and how it all will be organized, because I didn't know about that before. Different universities have different rules, so it might be a good idea to have a general picture before we move ahead.
Okay, I think Kalijan, you can introduce yourself, yes, and your topic, the title of your thesis, and so on, yes?
Okay, thank you. Professor Polishuk, the procedure is that I will be presenting my work generally. Then I guess you will be having some time for the questions, and I will have some matter of time as well for preparation. After all, I will generally answer the questions that you have. So this is the procedure, and then the voting goes.
All right.
So as much as I understood.
Okay, thanks very much. That's clear.
Thank
Appreciate this. Good luck.
Asir, can I share the screen as well? Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Thank you. Well, before we start, I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm very grateful for my parents, of course, for Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, for accepting me, a student from a different university, from Kimap University. And this is the first step that we have done as a PhD from Kimap University. I'm feeling very happy and, of course, very responsible, as I was already saying. So, of course, I want to thank the university, home university of mine, Kimap, that was home for me for almost 17 years. So let me just start with the, can you see the screen of mine?
Not so far, no.
Not so far. A moment, please.
Sure. It's coming.
So I've just shared it, so now it's available, yeah?
Give it a second.
Yes, thank you so much. So the theme of the work was obvious from the beginning. When I graduated Kimap, I started working as a specialist in the bank development industry in Kazakhstan, so it's a transition economy. So it was obvious for me that I want to know more about it. And generally, the point of view that we are trying to establish in regards to banking industry and transition economies is that we want to know how the reforms, how the regulatory matter, how the ownership structure is developed within this particular industry. So the first one is we want to understand from a diverse perspective, from diverse aspects, how the banking industry is affected in terms of performance and risk. So in order to understand it, we go on first with the establishment of the current state of the business modeling. Thereafter, we want to understand how different macroeconomic shocks, including the both internal macroeconomic shocks as internal smaller crises and the devaluation process, how they affect how bank-specific matters.
Sorry for interruption, but I think your presentation is not available now. Could you, I don't know, reload it or something, do something like this? It's not available now. Sorry.
Available, not available. Just a moment.
Could you relaunch it, please?
A moment, please. A moment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I've just shared it once again. Do you see now?
But it's still blank. It's black, and it says you're trying to share something, but we don't see any presentation so far.
What about now?
Still same, unfortunately.
We can't see it. So
no, take your time. It will pop up.
Take your time.
No worries.
Kalijan, maybe you will send it to me, and I try to put it in my screen, maybe.
Okay,
Could you send me
just a moment.
My WhatsApp, please? Try to send it to my WhatsApp.
Okay, a moment.
Also, you can send it to my Gmail too, please.
Mm-hmm. Just give me a sec. I will. I'm opening my email so that I can send it to you.
Okay. Is it PPT file?
Yeah, it's PowerPoint.
Okay. So, Kalijan, where did you send your presentation? To Gmail or WhatsApp?
Please give me a sec. There are some connection problems, I guess, because I'm trying to load up to my email address, and I guess, yeah.
Kalijan.
Yeah.
You hear me? Yeah. You can send by the Zoom chat. You can
Zoom chat as well. Oh, yeah. By the way.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Asiel, I've just sent it to you. Can you please check your email, please? because Doom chat is also have some connection problems.
Maybe Kalijan can continue while for the question presentation.
Yeah.
How do you think, dear colleagues?
If you don't mind, I can continue.
Sure, I have no objections.
Oh, thank you then.
We'll
I will be trying to be as precise as possible. So generally, the aspect that we are sharing is the problem of transition banking industry development from different aspects. So first, it's the current state of the business modeling. The second is the macroeconomic conditions, bank-specific factors that are affecting this. And the third one is the ownership structure. It is very important to understand that in any business development, the ownership plays a crucial role. But in any ways, for transition economies, where generally the bank-specific models, I mean, the banks themselves as a unit, they play a crucial role. So the ownership factor is one of the most important things because it collides with the problem of concentration of power. So it is another one aspect. The fourth aspect is since we are trying to establish a new so-called free market regime from the planned economy, we are about to we need to study the regulatory framework as well. So could this be the possibility that the regulatory framework itself affects the crisis embryo? So generally, we have these main 4 points that we have discussed, and we generally made some of the interviews as well. We conducted interviews with specialists from the field, practitioners. We discussed this matter with the Minister of Finance, Gani Uzbekov, with the top management of the banking industries only within Kazakhstani structure, and of course those who are responsible for the liquidity in the banks. So we discussed this matter with transition economies, banking industry, top of the treasury departments. So generally, our main structure is of the question statements are going in this line. So we would like to know how the compliance with regulatory norms and conditions in current economic state, how they are affected in transition economies. In order to understand it, the other hypothesis we want to understand is how interactive terms are affecting, because single unit effect can be biased. That's why we try to use the interactive terms where we put devaluation regulation, crisis regulation, ownership and crisis, and we do this for different samples and in 7 different modes that we have developed within the GMM system. So generally, the next statement is how we introduce business development options as non-banking activities are restricted, for example, on the regulatory level. So this is another one point. The question whether the regulation framework itself can embryo is another one point that we are hypothesizing. So taking into account whether regulation as a factor positively affects performance and financial stability in times of financial distress. If that is the case, then we need to understand, does it indicate that there is a moral hazard problem? Because as Professor Sankunli was stating, so in a normal economic state, like introduction of regulatory variables, they negatively affect the business development. What means that there is an asymmetry of information that is affecting the moral hazard problems. So in terms of the other hypotheses or statements that we address, we follow the Jimenez, who says that the idea that financial markets in economies in transition, they tend to be weak. So we focus on transition economies only in this particular study. So we examine this problem in separate economic zones to cross-compare the findings and identify the specifics of the weak economic areas and possibly understand what reforms and the regulatory framework can be applied to these particular countries under examination. Another one important thing is that we try to understand is that the bigger the bank size, the higher is the probability of the low performance. This is very actual for example, for the sample where we included only Kazakhstani market. The latest question is whether banks in transition economies kept to be the intermediary tool. The point here is that banks in transition economies, they are not setting the rules of strong financial institutions. They are generally financial intermediary units that are responsible for sharing this liquidity concern from the regulator as the national bank, for example, within down here in Kazakhstan or any other transition economies that we are generally examining. So the next slide is that we want to understand the framework within the 4 aspects that we have already stated. It's a business modeling. It's and we share the idea that we develop emerging markets within emerging market framework, we develop a single layer that is called the transitional economies. We address it because we want to understand and state this particular idea that emerging markets tend to be different. They are not homogeneous in nature. And there are like countries that, even so that we have included number of countries within the observation, still the perception of the risk and the performance within these countries, I mean, in the banking industries of these countries, they tend to be diversified. That's why we have to perceive like transition economies separately, apart from the emerging markets, because like in comparison, we can say that it could be like transition economies are just recently emerged, emerging markets, long-established countries. Most of the countries emerged under the post-Soviet Union countries. For the emerging markets, the long-lasting economic histories. So it is better market-oriented in the emerging markets and the less market-oriented in the industries of the transition economies, so on. So for the ownership structure, there is a question whether the ownership structure of banks has a direct effect on the performance in the financial institutions. So there is a problem of the concentration of power, both political and economic, because this factor is affecting the realm of the development, because owners of the bank can be the same subject as, for example, the regulatory framework, who are affecting this regulatory framework. So this is very constraining factor that is constraining the development within transition economies. So we expect the study to help clarify whether there is a need for more regulation in this particular sphere. So deeper over industry supervision will result and help us to establish new specific feature implications and direct reforms for particular units, not overall general like single banking industry for one country. So that's the point. Another one point is that in terms of regulation statement, we want to understand how the regulation is developed, but regulation is very diversified. There are so many prudential norms that we address. But for the banking industry, we select only 3 domains that were like categorized by the fundamentalist of this particular research. So we go on with reserve requirements, we go on with activity restrictions, we go on with the capital stringencies. So these 3 factors we will discuss later on more specifically. In terms of the contribution, generally there are like approaches that we have taken. We have somehow subdivided it into our own interactive term like modeling. So it helps us, it permits us, I mean, the methodology permits us to recognize those values within the model itself that were already included into the model, but are not completely recognized by some other weaker, not sophisticated modeling. So that's we use the that's the case why we use the GMM. GMM is helpful to recognize, for example, number of problems. I mean, both statistically and conceptually. So that's we use the GMM system. In terms of the period, of course, we want to examine the transition. So we want to examine the crisis factor that is affecting it. So we are taking both crisis years and aftermath. So that will help us to understand the whole picture of the changes. In terms of the regulatory framework, we are going with Basel requirements, of course. So recently, as Professor Sankoli was stating, it is well developed, and now it is once again under the discussion, because the regulatory framework needs to.
Sorry, sorry for interruption. Could you please, I don't know, maybe you should finish your demonstration. Could you please close your demonstration?
Okay.
Then I can demonstrate your work. Okay.
Oh yeah,
Thank
for sure. Yeah, I just
sorry,
ended it.
sorry
No
for
problem.
interruption.
No problem. So do you want to open the?
Yes, I tried to open your presentation. You can continue. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Moment. So we go on with the Basel review, yes, we already stated. So generally, the Basel requirement is to reduce the potential risk of arbitrage. So that's clear. And we go on with the adjustment in the Basel review. So generally, all the countries within the world were like adjusted to this Basel review coefficients. So they were satisfying, apart from the first year after the crisis that we are as well taking into consideration, 2009. So large banks only, they were not able to adjust to the crisis itself. So that's why there were like not enough coefficients that were responsible for the performance within these large banks. They are too big to fail. I mean, these banks were too big to adjust. So within a year, they adjusted with the lag. So we go on further with the literature review. So in terms of the literature review, we study like diversified structures, ownership structure, risk and return. So it goes with the leverage, it goes with the competition and capital. That is generally like a two sides of one stick. So regulation and supervision, macroeconomy. And for the ownership structure, we go on with the privatization, of course. So it depends whether it's foreignly opened, it's regulation and control, the effect of the crisis, state and private ownership, or the political motives. So we try to examine only fundamental works for this particular diversified views on the problem. And in terms of the sample, we generally took only transition economies. So we took Central and Eastern European countries. We took into consideration Caucasus and Balkan countries, and we took as well two peer countries as Argentina and Brazil. So generally all the data follows the IFRS standards. In terms of the regulatory framework, we developed it using the conceptual surveys that were taken from the World Bank. For some of the countries, they were not available. So that's why we used local country-specific surveys from the statistical agencies. So generally, data was collected for bank-specific indicators from Bloomberg Financial Information Resource. And we take 17 economies in transition with 97 banks from the list. So in terms of the sample, so in terms of the ownership, what was the most difficult part to collect data in regards to the ownership? So it shows that we follow the fundamentalist of Dink and Cornet, who were saying that at least 20% belonging to the state ownership, we can call that bank as a state bank. Otherwise, it will be a private, or we categorize it as well private, and the foreign bank as a single unit. So for the control variables, I will probably skip this part because variables are given in the study itself. So in terms of the regulatory framework, that is an important thing. We follow the studies of Barsetol, Lavin, and Levine. We follow the study of Jalilov and Peace. That is the recent work, but it was well referenced in many studies. And taking into consideration the regulatory framework, we take capital regulation, activity restrictions, and reserve requirements. So all of them are composed as they include factors such as securities, borrowings, and cash, for example, for capital regulation. In terms of the restrictions in activities, we restrict the point in securities market, activities in insurance, trading securities, and so on. For reserve requirements, of course, we satisfy the regulatory condition following the Basel III requirement. So once more, what is important to say about the net liquidity, it is one of the crucial moments in the whole study because liquidity was changing. Back in 2021, working as a treasury manager, we received the message from National Bank that was regulating us to change the mode of the calculation of the coefficient of the NSFR. And the liquid deposits were no longer available in this calculation. So what means that the rope around the necks of these banks is getting tighter. So it's mostly in a sequence go into the corporates, to the companies. And this like tightening will share to the whole macroeconomy. So this is the approach that we try to explain, because it is important for us to see the picture following like Nobel Prize winner Fama, who stated that idiosyncratic risk can affect the systemic risk. So this is the perception of the whole study that we try to understand, because we are using the single unit, how the risk perception in this particular unit will affect the whole industry, first of all, and then how it will affect following the Jimenez study, who was stating that banking is the unit is the main financial institution within transition economies. So how that will affect the macroeconomy. So this is the structures that we follow. That's why NSFR is an important variable that we have just shared with you. In terms of that score, we go on with the Boyd and Graham's. So generally there are number of diversified like Z-score calculations. However, the one that we take is Boyd and Graham. It is as simple as that profit in general should be higher than the consolidated equity, because otherwise there is no point to go on further. And the distribution is normal, so the density is that should be higher than the capital itself. So reversing this rearranging, this formula, we get the Z-score measure. So it is simply stating that Z-score is the risk score of the distance from the bank insolvency. The higher is the score, the higher is the risk insolvency rate. So that's the way of thinking. In terms of the model, as we already said, we follow Agaraki, who was developing the endogenous modelings. He was a fundamentalist in this particular study. We follow GMM establishment. So in transition economies, there are so many dynamic factors, and especially in the banking industry. So when we consider bank industry data, the data is very dynamic. So that's why we have to deal with this problem, because it can create the endogeneity problem within the system. So that's why we follow the GMM study, GMM methodology in this particular mode. So in terms of methodology building, we go on with the study of Altumbas, who was developing the idea with Dietrich, and further on, it was in one of the studies, by the way, in the KIMAP University, PAC as well developed this model. So in terms of the, once again, methodology, it is addressed when the dependent variable are found to be persistent. It means that there can be simultaneous causality from one side to the other side. That's why we have to deal with this problem. On the other hand, it is conceptually right for us to use the GMM system, because it recognizes those variables that are already in use, as I was previously saying. But it helps us to distinguish the difference, because the constant within the methodology captures these individual effects, so they can create the biasness within the findings. Generally, we do not make many adjustments. That's the purpose of our study, because we want to make sure that the generalizability of our study will be as much as possible close to the true values of the population. So the sample was built with many assumptions. We as well incorporate outliers to the study, so that's the important thing that we want to go on with. We use Hausman test in order to identify whether we use the fixed effects or random effects, and for surely both conceptually and statistically, we go on with the fixed effects model, which is generally the hypothesis is saying that the null hypothesis, where there is no correlation between the constant and the coefficient, is accepted. That's why we use the fixed effects model. In terms of the probably we can skip the methodology part. We've talked about a little more than what I was expecting. So in terms of the that score for the BM model, for the business modeling of the banking industry, the score is equal to 53 points. 53 points indicating that, yeah, quite a good range, as we can see. But the dispersion between the lowest and the highest rate is quite wide. What is indicating that the perception within this sample by the banks is very diversified. It means that the turbulence within this framework of the sample is very high. So we cannot say that the business modeling with these transition economies for the business modeling is good example. So for the regulatory framework, the score is already high. Previously, it was 53. For the regulatory framework, it almost 67, 66 points, and so on. So 67. Still, the spread of this minus and plus ratio is very high, indicating that the turbulence is very high as well. So that's why we cannot go on with, once again, stating that the business modeling is working well. For the risk and return, this is another one important point that we want to address. We use for the performance rate as return on assets and net interest margin. And for some of the studies, we use equity as well. But the main point here is that following Altumbas, once again, return on asset helps us to explain the vision of the bank of a single unit, how they perceive the risk. What is the perception of the risk, and what is the risk attitude of this single unit towards accepting this level of the risk. So that helps us a lot to understand the unit. I mean, by saying unit, I mean the single bank, how it reacts to the changes on the macroeconomic level and internal systemic shocks as well. So for the NIM, net interest margin, it is helpful to understand the margin, because it helps us to define whether the funding goes from the bank itself, or, for example, they are taking privilege of the customers that they have. So this is about the variables in use. One I cannot show you probably, but there is a very high turbulence for Kazakhstani market as well. For example, in 2011, 2012, 2014, up until 2014, there are drastic upward scores for the Kazakhstani market. But we cannot say that that score is the good business modeling for Kazakhstani market as well, because during that period of customization, there was a devaluation process that took place. So it only indicates that the banks in those times, they were holding these indexed values of the deposits in mostly in foreign currencies. So when devaluation took place, they just rise in the model. So that's why it once again cannot be said that the business modeling is working well. So probably we can skip the this part as well. We can go with the findings. Yeah. So for Kazakhstani market, as you remember, for the BM module, for the regulatory framework and ownership structure, there was 53, 51, and 67 points. For Kazakhstani market, it's 10.09. So it's very low on average, but still we had some 100 points for the years of 2011, 12, and 14, excuse me. So Kazakhstani banking industry earnings are highly concentrated on traditional bank earnings, and the Kazakhstani banking industry struggles with concentration of power. So the size of the bank insignificant, but negatively affect the measure of risk. So liquidity risk has positive relationship with that score. This is, by the way, in line with the fundamentalist Huizinga. Further on, so the volume of the loans increases, the quality of loan decreases. This is a rational expectation. In terms of the macroeconomic measures, GDP is negatively related with both net interest margin and return on assets as well. So this is a strange finding, by the way, but it is quite unique for the banking industry, because during the like loans of higher requirement in times of the financial distressful years. So that's why probably it is expected. In terms of the BM model findings, so we can say that liquidity risk, capital regulation, fee income, all positively associated with return on assets. So different outcome was for the crisis inclusion. This once again indicates the weakness of the overall banking model and business model, I mean, across this examination under the sample. So small capital influence from the equity holders, low diversity of product lines, and state funding of the banks clearly indicate like weak control of the management. So it refers to the problems of the moral hazard, as we can probably say. Crisis diminishes the possibility to allocate the funds to high return products. So as you can see, during the normal economic times, incorporating the regulatory framework into the model, we receive negative effect. While when the crisis is there, we can see that the effect is changing to the positive side. What indicates that managers within these banks, they misbehave. They are willing to share the funds to high return projects, so they can receive.
Sorry, Kalijan, we have a time limit, so.
Yeah, just give me 2 more minutes. I understand. Excuse me. So I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, probably we can go on with general indication. So all the regulatory factors positively affect risk in specification with and without inclusion of the crisis effect. In specification where we examine all regulatory factors separately, only the reserve requirements has positive effect on the financial stability. Other specifications show negative sign. This is a huge indication. It shows that banks in transition economies rely heavily on the liquidity concern. And this liquidity concern comes out from the subsidies, from the government support, and this is not a good business modeling strategy that is going on in transition economies today. And we have almost 30 years. I mean, by saying we have not only Kazakhstani economy or the post-Soviet Union countries, all these countries within 3 decades still rely on the fundamental support of the state, so-called Keynesian hand, state hand. So this is not good business modeling as we have understood from this study. Of course, this is the first line that we have developed for this particular study. There are many other perspectives that we want to study, but still for now, I wouldn't say that it's very perspective and sustainable development for the long term. So concluding, I would just like to say that we use the full sample examination for the crisis. This indicates that overall weakness and vulnerability of the economies in transition. In all specifications, only reserve requirements, regulation mode exhibits positive regulatory effect. All other factors, control variables, regulatory factors, they differently affect the financial stability. And this only leads to the idea that both practitioners the theorists and the reformers, regulators, they have to perceive and constantly investigate the banking industries with those adjustments. And I mean, adjustment to the capital, to the reserve requirements, and like bank-specific factors as well. So this is the ending part of the presentation. I'm sorry for taking for so long, and I would be very pleased to try and answer your questions. Dear committee, thank you so much. I'm done.
Okay, the report is over. What question will be for the applicant? You are welcome.
Well, if you don't mind, may I start? I have a couple of questions too.
Okay.
Mr. Kaliyev.
Professor Polishuk, okay.
Kalajan, if I can use your first name, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Now, my first question is why you have different results. You have a couple of levels of analysis, which I think is a very good thing. First, you do cross-country analysis using emerging markets and transition economies. And you observe one set of results. And that gives you a chance to place Kazakhstan against the background of comparable countries of the world. But then you move on and you do analysis in Kazakhstan.
Где его этот техсекретарь?
Microphone.
Okay, so the second portion of your analysis about Kazakhstan only. In your sample is a set of Kazakhstani banks. It's a panel, as far as I understand. There are some differences in the results of these two parts. And in particular, you show that the role of financial crises and more generally macroeconomic shocks for the cross-country sample is usually positive. And for Kazakhstan, at least in some specifications, it's negative. So my question is, can you explain that? Because I think this is quite important. My second question is, you deal with Kazakhstani sample in two sections of your work. I believe these are section 5 and 6. And in section 6, you concentrate on ownership and regulation. But my question is, why would you separate your analysis in two parts? Why wouldn't you include all these factors in one particular set of regressions? So what added value you get by handling these issues separately? And my third and final question is, you imply in the introductory section that regulation in Kazakhstan could be ineffective or less effective than you would expect because there is a danger of regulatory capture, that the same people run banks and can influence regulatory agencies. Do you have any evidence to support this?
Yeah, got it, Professor.
The body of your dissertation is mostly quantitative analysis, your regression analysis. You mentioned that you also had some interviews, but these interviews are very rarely mentioned in the body of the dissertation. At least I didn't see much of mentioning of this. If this is something that you infer from the interviews, then I think it's an important part of your analysis, and in my opinion, it should have been included in the body of the dissertation. So if you can please comment on this, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Polishuk.
Thank you.
Who is next? Dear colleagues.
May I ask?
Good day, Professor.
Okay. Professor Muhammadiev, please.
I want to ask, I saw in dissertation in your thesis that I cannot find now, where is it? Situation was that between the for panel data, it is between the fixed effects and random effects someplace. But now in your presentation, you said that you used fixed effects model.
Yeah.
Could you explain it more in detail?
For sure. Thank you, Professor.
And the second question, it is technical question only. On table 18, on page 79 in your dissertation, I see that some values are shown, that T statistics shown here, and values less than 1
Yeah.
are shown as they have the coefficient have significance at 5% level.
Mhm.
2 stars, for example.
Mhm.
For example, as I remember, they should be approximately close to 2 in order to have 5% level of significance.
Mhm.
If even we see infinity number of degrees of freedom.
Mhm.
So please explain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Bulat Mitaich. 2 questions. Bulat Mitaich. Okay.
I can ask?
Hello, Professor.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. I have so many questions for Kalijan, but for the short time, I take it 2 questions for this. Is you use GMM technique in your research thesis, but I want to ask for the GMM. We have system GMM, difference GMM, and one-step GMM, two-step GMM. Which one you use it in your thesis?
Difference GMM, Professor.
System or different? I think system, but one step or two step?
Professor?
Yeah, one step or two step?
System GMM, 1 step. Yeah.
Thank you. The other question for the, if you see table 7, 8, 9, three table, this is table. We have the lack of, for example, financial stability, or Z score, or lack for the profitability. The lack have, I think, have negative sign. Yes. That's mean the previous bank profitability have negative effect in future.
Yeah.
Bank profitability.
Because of Rodman, Professor, we follow the study of Rodman. He was stating that when the coefficient, this is actually, oh, excuse me.
Please answer later.
Okay, excuse me.
Okay.
Just this like recommendation you take it in the future for the, for example, if you say the previous year's stability, bank stability will positively affect in the future bank stability. But as see in the table, we have, for example, row T-1 have negative effect on in the 3 table. That's mean profitability. Previous year have negative effect in the future profitability.
Yeah.
This is
I got
result. You can explain. Yes.
Yes.
This is one. Yeah. I have some, but I think I will make it as a report and send it to your supervisor to check and take it in consideration in the future time. Okay, this is simple. Some correction.
Thank you, Professor.
That's enough for me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Al-Badri. Who is next?
I think
Yeah, I
Mr.
would
Tan
like to
was
ask.
Yeah.
Yes, Professor Leonid, please go ahead. I will ask after you.
Professor Khaled?
Well, I'm not the chairperson. I just want to suggest that you're raising your hands. You're about to start speaking.
Thank you very much.
Permission,
it's a nice presentation, and sorry there was some connectivity issues in the start. So
Thank
the
you.
thing is, as asked the Professor Leonid, maybe there was some again connectivity issue with me. You mentioned what I've heard about interviews, that you have done interviews as well.
Yes.
So I don't know, and I believe you must have already answered to Professor Leonid, but it was disconnected with me at that time. So have you incorporated in your like write-up, and if like does the results obtained support the quantitative results?
Okay, got it, Professor.
Yeah, and Professor Mary has talked about the GMM. So you said you have gone for the GMM, SGMM 1 step. So, have you been able to find out the lag variables and the independent lag variables? And if you have taken like how much lag variables you have gone up to, like lag variable 1, 2, 3, like what was that number?
Got, Professor, I got it.
And finally, about the implications, and I think because you have finished it very quickly. So what is your practical implications of this? You feel like for this study, what practical implications you have?
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kayani. Kalijan? Asif?
Hello?
Yes.
I think Kalijan is having connection problem. We
Yes.
cannot see and hear him. Which is a pity because he's an important member.
Kalijan?
Kalijan is back.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know. I was just taken out. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I got it, Professor. The third question is in regards to implications. I got it.
Okay. And who is next?
I just want to just further the questions which our esteemed worthy colleagues have already asked, the Dr. Al-Badri and Dr. Ghani. So the question which I also wanted to ask about the lag variables, which has already been asked.
Okay.
And also, like in the future, if you want to go, enhance your sample size, because probably the sample size needed to be, included many others, so that we can get a more generalizable implications of research. Okay.
Thank you, Professor. Got it.
Thank you, Professor Khan. Okay, who is next?
I have just one question about the project. It was written in your dissertation, and I'd like to know what kind of project it is, and will you have an act of implementation?
Got it, Professor.
That's
Thank you. And no questions. Okay. If no questions, there are 9 questions totally. Kalijan, if you need additional time to prepare for questions, we can give to flow to scientific consultants.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We give the floor to the domestic scientific consultant of applicant, Doctor of Economics, acting professor, Mira Nurmakhanova, for the announcement of the review, please.
Thank you so much. I would love to express my sincere gratitude. As Kalijan has already mentioned, this is our first PhD candidate who is defending his dissertation. We used to have PhD, DBA program, but this is the first PhD candidate. So we are quite nervous, and yeah. Well, my review actually, states that, of course, everybody knows that the functioning of the financial system is very important for the economic development of the country, because financial sector is going to be an intermediary between those who have some savings and those who borrow money, and especially if it comes to companies, it comes to corporations, they will be, of course, borrowing money for expanding their production, and that will be boosting GDP. So proper functioning of the financial system overall and banking sector is going to be very crucial, not for like just overall all countries, but in Kazakhstan, it's going to be of the additional importance, since we are still in transition and our financial system and our banking sector are still developing. They are going under some changes, and knowing what will affect our stability of banking sector and how all these regulative norms will be affecting stability of our banking sector are going to be, of course, of big importance for us. So as a supervisor of Kalijan, I would say that he was quite thoroughly investigating different factors that might affect the stability of our financial sector, and he was not looking only at the regulation norms, he was also looking at the ownership structure. He has mentioned that he was conducting several interviews with people from the banking sector, and the process, research process is still going on, it's not over. There are going to be some other papers that we are planning to publish, and results are going to be presented later on. So not everything that we've done so far already are included in dissertation. So some part of it only. There are some going to be other results which are going to be published a bit later.
Okay, thank you, Professor. The floor is given to the Academic Secretary of the Dissertation Council, Asil Kushurbayevna, to announce the review of the foreign scientific consultant, PhD professor and dean at the BRIC Business College, BRIC University, San Honli, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Please, Asil.
Thank you, Olaf Inspector. As you can see from my screen, there is a review of the PhD dissertation by Kalijan Kaliyev titled Analysis of Bank Risk and Performance Across Transitional Economies, submitted requirements for the PhD degree. So what about relevance? The author investigates the performances of banks in transitional economies which experience major restructurings of ownership, governance, and regulations, as well as several economic and banking crises in global scale in the past. What about novelty? The author investigates banks' performance in terms of risks and profitability in the transition economies during 2008 and 2017, in which these banks experienced several economic and financial crises. What about structure and coherence? The author provides extensive literature reviews and careful application of empirical model to analyze the bank performance in transitional economies upon environmental and ownership change during the transition period. What about content? The main methods of analysis are the comparisons between different regions, comparisons between crisis vs post-crisis period, and comparison between transition vs emerging or developed markets, and the other statements. So what about key findings? The study finds that the crisis factor on risk is positive, indicating that there is an increase in vigilance toward the need to capitalize more. So what about overall assessment? The scope of the study is extensive with complete list of relevant literature reviews. The findings can be an important addition to the existing previous studies which are scanned. The author may deserve a PhD degree and recommend it to the official defense. San Lee, PhD, Professor of Finance and Dean. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Asil Kusurbaevna. Dear applicant.
Yes, I'm here.
Please answer the questions.
Thank you so much once again. So in regards to the questions for the crisis and macroeconomic perspective that was asked by Professor Polishuk. So it is negative for Kazakhstani market because generally the banking business model development here is Kazakhstan is heavily dependent on those factors. Moreover, it is a contributing factor is the ownership. Ownership and regulation. So why we do them separately? The factor is that first of all, we try to incorporate them at a single unit effect. Then we, following the recommendation of Professor Leon Taylor, we did the interactive terms where we incorporated both ownership and regulation and devaluation and regulation and ownership. So the findings approximately were the same. However, there is a collinearity between the variables because the most significant factor was crisis that was affecting the values of the dependent variable. So that's why we try to use interactive terms as a separate following the answer to the question. So regulation, it captures as well the Kazakhstani market. So ownership in Kazakhstan, why it's concentrated? Because generally it is as we understood following the interviews that we have conducted with the practitioners, they state that it is the historical heritage that a single unit, for example, single subject can be responsible for both the reforms, the business development, being the owners of the bank, and of course, for the regulatory framework. So that's why there is a concentration of power that is heavily affecting the ownership structure. So in terms of the interviews, we just tried to do this project in order to understand the further gaps for the further studies. For example, now we work on the article that we will be doing based on the interviews. So these interviews were generally included into the appendix body of the whole dissertation. We tried to launch it separately because we just wanted to understand whether there is a gap in the study, whether these findings that we have obtained are in line with the true population. And that was the idea for this particular project. It's a first step. So we will go on with the development further on, and we are now working on the conceptual paper that we are about to probably do by the end of this year. I hope so. So in terms of the effects that we use, generally GMM system, it is it's not a panacea, as I'm saying, but it helps to deal with the unrecognized variables within the system, with the it helps us to deal with the endogeneity variables, between the variables, simultaneous causality, and we use this particular option as alternative to, for example, for the frontier analysis. And for generally, we can use instrumental variables as well for these studies, but it will not conceptually perceive the whole study that we are doing here. So for us, it is important not to decompose the problem, but to include this problem, because in transition economies, the main problem is that banks, they tend to decompose the problematic NPLs, non-payment loans, for example, from the observation. And by doing so, of course, we will obtain the good results, but this is not the option for us. So that's why we include both outliers, we make assumptions, and we incorporate this problematic active as well. So in terms of the t-statistics, this is probably the case, as Rodman says, why we have not significant values, but still we went on with this problem and making it as an assumption. So that's why the Rodman study referred to the coefficients that is generally higher than 1. Generally, it should not be so. Statistically, but there are assumptions we've made, and so on. We go, for example, for the preliminary studies for Kazakhstani market. In terms of the one step, we just use GMM one step. So we try to use the lag variables for the dependent variable, for the macroeconomic variables as well, because reforms and macroeconomic effects that are affecting the data within the banking industry, they are coming with a lag. So that's why we try to use the lag for them. In terms of the, yeah, I probably have already answered the question, does results of the support the interviews? Yeah, we discussed this matter with Gani Uzbekov, who is the Minister of Finance, I mean, former Minister of Finance. He stated that the concentration is heavily affecting the development. It is generally constraining this development because first of all, regulators, they are responsible for the general macroeconomy. And of course, there is a trade-off between the performance and the financial stability. So it's a stick with the two sides. So that's why they are taking into consideration the impact of these like owners of the banks who were previously like at the state service. So answering the question, yes, they are generally they confirmed that some of the business holders, they previously were on a state service. That's why the ownership is very difficult and a constraining moment for the development of the financial market in Kazakhstan. I mean, this is especially only for Kazakhstan because we have conducted these interviews in Russian, but we were about to translate it like on YouTube channel. You can see it only in Russian, but we were about to translate it to Russian so that it will be acceptable for international audience as well. But there is written like proof that yes, the concentration is there and the ownership structure is affecting the development, constraining the development. So in terms of the implications, there are a number of implications that we tried to state. So as a reserve requirements, for example, they, just give a sec. In terms of their implications, yeah. As a reserve requirements and government subsidies, there are often highly contributing factors to the performance in banking industry. So the best option is to allocate it in a manner where shareholders are going to be primary investors. So this is the first implication. Compliance with the main regulatory framework, which is adjusted to the current state within the states of the under examination. This is another one. So Basel Accord already includes this particular approach. So they are already adjusting it. So an adjustment should go with the capital, with the assets, with the bank-specific factors. So and of course with the ownership structure. It is one of the crucial moments. So the proposition is to constantly observe the banking industry and make the reforms in regards to these particular features. This is in regards to the implications, and in regards to the projects that we have conducted. We just wanted to launch it in 2021. But following once again the renewal of the rules for the currency control, we have to now adjust it. So the idea of the project, answering the question, Professor Munira, so we are launching now the new NSFR standards with cooperation. Nowadays, we cooperate together with reformers, regulators, and the bank representatives. So the new adjustment will launch a new ratio for the NSFR, which will not be including the liquid liabilities, I mean deposits. So that will help us to truly indicate the value of the bank in terms of the liquidity. And this, of course, will constrain the corporates, I mean the companies and it will spread into the whole economy as well, because companies are generally responsible for the macroeconomic condition, and especially in terms of the exchange rates or the forex. So I probably have answered all questions. I hope so, professors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Is everyone satisfied with the answers?
I am, thanks.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, we are satisfied.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is given to the first official reviewer, PhD Associate Professor, Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, Doshan Raygul Dukirbakoza, please.
Good day, dear members of Dissertation Council. Let me perform my review for the dissertation work of Kalijan Sagatbekovich Kaliev on the topic analysis of bank risk and performance across transition economies, granted for the degree of PhD in the specialty 6D050900 Finance. The whole text of the review posted on the university website. I would like to highlight the main points of the dissertation. The relevance of the research topic is high and important. Dissertation makes a significant contribution to science. The significance of bank to determine its risk appetite and improve the performance has become crucial over the years based on past and recent financial crises, and it's resulted in an increased attention of the risks of banks and their financial instruments. The research topic corresponds to the priority direction of the development of science and has close connection with the main state programs and the concept of the development of financial markets of Republic of Kazakhstan, as well as the state program Digital Kazakhstan. So all the principles of research work were observed. The topic of dissertation is relevant and justified. The interest of the studies, the transition economy, that is a new driver for the global development. Hence, it creates a new interest for the investors, and that is why increasing the levels of necessity for the scientific research of the problem. The examination of the process of financial intermediation is important both in terms of practical and theoretical sense. Scientific results, conclusions, and recommendations of the dissertations are substantiated and reliable. Scientific novelty and the main provisions were evaluated as follows. First provision, the result substantial liquidity portion as the only part of the business model that has significant effect on both financial stability and performance measures of banks in transition. This provision been proven through GMM methodology for dynamic patterns of variables. The concept of transition economies from the point of view of financial intermediary process was developed by the author. There is a lack of confirmed studies upon the category of transition economies, only that author categorized as a separate layer of emerging markets. And this result is new separate examination of transition economies is recommended by the author. Overall examination emerging markets can lead to biased findings. Provision 2, according to ownership structure of banking, has direct effect on performance of financial institution in transitional economies. The findings within the study show that ownership structure examined separately of the factor of crisis has a significant effect on both financial stability and performance measures in different sample specifications. Specific qualitative factor has weaker effect when the factor of crisis is included into the model. And this result is also proven. The GMM system application is useful in both conceptual and empirical aspects. The system of GMM developed within the purpose of usage of highly dynamic values of the variables. Banking business modeling establishment in economies in transition is approach author addressed as the one which is separate from overall emerging markets observation. And the next provision, the result utilizing the GMM methodology, indicating the reserve requirements, regulatory norms as the only significant factors that improve the profitability and diminish the risk of financial instability in the banking sector of transitional economies across the large sample of countries. It's also proven the methodology is propose accessed the value of both performance and risk in different subsamples. More specifically, author applies 7 different combinations of modeling. The specifications, the bank-specific factors only, including the factor of crisis and etc. This is the operational cost of estimated through accounting measures that permits to examine idiosyncratic risk. In this sequence, the effects of systemic risk can be traced. About the provision of 4, result is also proven. Author addresses the point that conservation power is legitimate in the countries that transition and officially support by the local government by improving only banking structures that are largely politicized. The result indicates that banking is, example in Kazakhstan, the banking industry has a specific feature of powerful shareholders that are largely enrolled in political administration within the country before taking the helm of running the business of financial intermediation. This result is partially new. Banking business modeling establishment in economies in transition was examined as problematic and constrained by the power of concentration that postpones the development and introduction truly applicable market level that can help expand the financial markets. And the last provision 5, the result of robustness test of the main findings applying GMM across the 5 different subsamples. Its result is proven and new. The methodology application for all sample specification within the results are given. And author combines the approach of different fundamental studies. For instance, the approach to take operating efficiency combined with interactive terms of crisis and regulatory factors is a new approach. Some studies were done on the examination of emerging markets and separately on the classification of post-Soviet Union countries, and however, combination representing transition economies of different parts of the world in one study is not common. All the research findings have been proven in published scientific articles of the author. The quality of academic writing dissertation I can assess as high. The author justified the thoughts well and to the point. The dissertation contains logical reasoning and very factual. Author well addressed citations and references to the works of other scientists. Some of the fundamental studies are used for the building part of the methodology. Sum up, I would like to note the content of the dissertation corresponds all the goals and objectives of the study, and the scope of the study is extensive with a completed list of relevant literature review. Findings can be important addition to the existing previous studies, and author might deserve the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the specialty 6D 050900 Finance. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Dr. Aygul Dukimbayqızı. The floor is given to the second official review, PhD, Associate Professor, Director of International Cooperation Department, Almaty Management University, Nurgazin Nasil Muratovna, please.
Good day, dear colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to join you in this council. Let me shorten my answer, making the main points of the review in order to exclude any repetition. Generally, the thesis and its topic corresponds to the requirements and match the main criteria for these types of works, papers, scientific papers. Of course, we can say that the risk management and general assessment of the priorities of the banking sector is very important and crucial, especially currently for our country and general for the dynamic societies. As for thesis, it is corresponds to the priority directions of science development, and we can say that the used model is relevant and could be generally used for the purposes in order to estimate general risks in these spheres. In this regard, I would like to find that I would like to say that it's not really understandable that we have any competitive advantages under these alternative models. Maybe in other findings of a future, we could enlarge the capacity of this research by proving or providing evidence for this model or other alternative formats. For the next principles of internal utility, we could say that it is justified. In this relation, we can say that in some used periods, we can observe data assessment and performance starting from 2007 up to 2017. Of course, you know, the current situation on our market connected to pandemic and post-pandemic situation. And in this regard, we could say that maybe the work could be more evidence for the those periods of crisis that we observe currently on the market and how it could match the expectation of the authorities, financial authorities, and the banks themselves, including the CIS countries. The main idea of the thesis of the assessment of banking sector on the emerging market is proved and evidenced. It is fully interconnected to the topic and logically presented. We can see that, as I mentioned before, we exclude some crucial periods for observation and assessment. Moreover, we can say that the strengthened part of the work is related to the opportunity for the author to combine results on a general level, like micro level, and for individually for the banks. But it is not really, or we couldn't understand via the main content how it could be applied for each individual bank, or how we could prevent collapses based on the findings of some banks and or holdings on our current situation on the market. Nevertheless, the work is completely new, and we could say that for each position it's separately proven. That's why it could have some practical implementation as well as the conceptual findings that we could apply for the research opportunities. In this regard, we could say that the general related spheres is absorbed on the needed appropriate levels, and we could recommend the paper and the doctoral students for to be awarded for the PhD degree. As I mentioned before, the full version of my review could be found on the general documents package, and based on the needed criteria, it is assessed following the requirements and criteria for this type of the basis. Thank you. If you have any questions, I could answer as well.
Thank you. Dr. Asil Muratovna. Kalijan Sagatbekovich, please respond to the comments from official reviewers.
I've got it. Thank you so much in regards to the comments, and yeah, I will try to decompose the data further on for 2019 and further on, because this particular study includes the years of the observation. Yeah, as Professor Asil Nurgazina stated, yeah, we will go on with the new data and the specific microeconomic approach for the single unit. That's about to be done for the papers, probably not for the dissertation work itself, but we will go on with that. We generally discussed this matter before with Professor Asil Nurgazina, and we have written it already as the new pinpoints for our further studies. And of course, Professor Aygul, yeah, I thank you for your comments and for your wishes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Dr. Aygul Dukimbayqızı, Asil Muratovna, are you satisfied with the answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
Always satisfied.
Okay.
Thank you.
So formal discussion is over. Official reviewers gave positive feedback on the dissertation of the applicant. We turn to the free discussion. Who wants to speak? You are welcome.
Well, I would like to say a few words, if I may. I like the dissertation. I think it's a solid piece of work, and I myself have no doubts that Mr. Kaliyev is a qualified and competent scholar who shows solid knowledge of the topic of the study, and apparently he's had quite a bit of first-hand experience of studying banking in Kazakhstan. At the same time, he seems to be competent in using modern analytical tools, especially empirical tools, and he has he has a good grasp of the literature as well. And there is a lot of useful stuff in the dissertation. A problem that I had reading the dissertation is that the presentation can be significantly improved, in my opinion. There are lots of separate results scattered all over a long text. And at least for those who read it for the first time, it's sometimes difficult to elicit the main findings and to find links between different parts of the analysis. I am primarily an institutional economist, so what I found as particularly interesting parts was, of course, the role of ownership and crisis and regulation. And one result that really is strikingly interesting is that the size of a Kazakhstani bank has a negative coefficient in regression analysis for different sorts of performance measures. In other words, in Kazakhstan banking sector, small is beautiful. And that makes a whole lot of sense. But on the other hand, it's very popular in developing economies to try to concentrate resources for development and to have big development banks. So apparently, for some reasons, it does not quite work in Kazakhstan. Then another observation that Mr. Kaliyev made, but unfortunately, it's not fully substantiated in the dissertation, is that regulation in Kazakhstani banking is not particularly efficient because the economic and political power in the country is very heavily concentrated. And that also corresponds to a large body of literature, which I would suggest to elaborate more. And that is that unless institutions are fully inclusive, and we're talking about economic and political institutions, then attempts to regulate the economy would have limited impact. Because against a backdrop of concentrated economic and political power, those who are supposed to be regulated have multiple ways to sidestep this regulation. And again, the dissertation hints at that, but again, I would like to see more firm evidence. And speaking of that, one of the main findings was that regulation, at least in the context of Kazakhstan, is relevant and efficient only at times of crisis. And now, first of all, I'm not quite sure if this is what the regression showed. That's something that can be discussed separately. Basically, we base this conclusion on running first a regression with regulation only without a dummy for crisis. And we see that regulation is insignificant. Then we include the dummy for crisis, and regulation becomes significant. I'm not sure that indicates that regulation is relevant only at time of crisis. Because to make this statement, I would instead include an interaction between crisis and regulation. And if this interaction is of the right sign and significant, then I guess you can make this statement. But then I would agree that this is an indication that there is considerable weakness in the overall regulatory system, because I think bank supervision, regulation, whatnot, should be effective and efficacious not only at time of crisis, but also in the in the day-to-day operation of the bank. And apparently, you do not quite see that in your analysis. And then I also would like to support your finding that transition economies should be analyzed separately from other emerging market economies because they share some common features. And if you single out a sample of transition economies only, then you can more clearly see certain regularities and patterns that you probably will not be able to see if you pool these economies. with the rest of transition economy. So this is also something that I believe is a useful part of the analysis. But overall, especially because it's clear that Mr. Kalieva and his economic advisor, Professor Nurmahanova, are planning papers, future papers based on this analysis. I would urge you to restructure what you have to make more clear your hypotheses, your findings, so on and so forth. Perhaps you might even want to sacrifice some technical details to make sure that your main findings are clear and understandable to those who read the paper. Overall, congratulate you on the good work, and it was a pleasure to read the dissertation. I learned quite a bit. It still leaves quite a bit of room for improvement, though.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Polishuk. Anyone else who want to speak up? No?
No.
Okay. If not, we should give the floor to the applicant for the final vote. Kalijan, please.
Well, I have nothing to say. This is a special moment for me, as I was saying from the beginning. A huge responsibility. I'm so sorry for the inconveniences that took place in the beginning of the presentation. And what's more, I'm thankful for taking me so seriously and for taking this of work so in details and giving me so many adjustments that I have to go on further when I will be doing my research further on. This is the first step. It took a long time, but I'm so happy to be here today, representing HIMAP as the first PhD student from these grounds and being in the most heavy university here in Kazakhstan, Kazakh National University, in the name of Al-Farabi. What I want to say, I'm just so grateful for my parents, for you, for the committee, for all those people who were enrolled, because this is not my only effort, and I'm just grateful. So thank you so much, professors. I will try to be responsible and to follow your expectations in my further works. Thank you so much. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Kalijan. We have completed the discussion of the dissertation work of Kaliyev Kalijan Sagatbekovich. We proceed to the next stage of the council meeting to conduct secret voting. Asil Kusherbayan sends you the link for the voting. Asil?
Thank you, Arif Mispekuna. So dear members of Dissertation Council and reviewers, so now I will send the link to your emails. Please check your email boxes. So
Can you send through the WhatsApp, because your email often goes to the spam folders, so probably.
Well, sometimes it does actually, yeah. So make sure you check your spam folder. That's a good point.
yes, please check your spam folder. And so you have 4 options. As you know, there are 4 options. The first option for the awarding degree of Doctor of Philosophy PhD. The second option for the revision of the dissertation thesis. The third option is submit the dissertation for the defense. And the last option is refuse to award the degree of Doctor of Philosophy PhD. Please check your email.
I still don't see the link.
Yes, I received it. Thanks.
Okay.
Can we vote now?
So just a moment. Let me check. And also, I kindly recommend you don't forget to press the button submit. Okay.
Okay.
So Munira Ilkunovna, are you here? Munira Ilkunovna, your login is. I send the link to your email to Munira Ilkunovna. Please check your email box.
Yes, you received. Yes.
Celia doesn't still have the link.
Okay. Dear dissertation council members, can you write to our chat if you're done? Okay.
I haven't received an email.
Okay,
I
just a
haven't
moment.
received. Yeah. So
Okay,
the
just a
thing
moment.
is, the link you've shared on the WhatsApp, I've used that. So is it okay?
Okay, let me check. Just a moment.
Well, if I may, I received this voting ballot twice, one after the other. Number one or number two, and they're completely identical.
The same question.
The
You
last
say
one.
you have the same, I guess.
Here's the last one.
The last one, okay, right.
Yes, the last one.
So let's see.
So, could you please identify
No, they
what's the
insist on
difference
answering first,
between
actually.
what's the difference between the first and the second points in the survey?
Okay, in my case, I guess you should press the same button twice, and then it will accept it. Presumably, you give the same answer to both questions, but the small know-how life hack is to do it twice to make sure that you're certain. Okay. Okay, but
I'm glad to see you, Professor.
But thanks, Asel, for helping us to vote. It did work at the end.
Let me check. So as I understand, all members received the link, yes? Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me check, please. Wait a minute. So there are 13 answers and we should receive 14. Ajar Zimnulaevna, did you vote? Did you send your response?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think it is Munira Yelkunovna, yes? Munira Yelkunovna, did you vote?
Yes, I did.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. So let me reload. So, Wait a minute, please. Let me check. We should receive totally 14 votes, 12 from dissertation council members and 2 from reviewers. And so now I'm uploading this page, and let me check one more time. Thank you, Azharzanulevna. I saw that your vote. So,
Kusherbayan, are you ready? No?
wait a minute. The answers are downloading. Just a minute, please. I upload this page. Wait a minute, please. Let me check. Ardov Nispekna, I'm ready.
Okay. To announce the results of the secret ballot, the floor is given to the Secretary of Council, Asil Kusherbayan, please.
Thank you, Ardov Nispekna. Let me share my screen. Wait a minute. Can you see? Can you see my screen?
No, not yet. No.
No,
Not yet.
Still blank.
only black screen.
What about now?
Yeah.
It's okay. Yes.
Yes. So as you can see, there were four options. Yes, and as you can see, all members of dissertation council, also 2 reviewers, voted to award a Doctor of Philosophy PhD degree. Congratulations, Mr. Kalijan.
Okay. I ask you to vote for the approval of the
What was the
results.
reason to? What was the reason to double these the same questions? Sorry.
Make it twice clear.
Sorry, it was a technical problems, technical mistake.
Sorry,
Anyway, congratulations. Very
Thank you
good.
so much. Thank you so much, professors.
I ask you to vote for the approval of the results of the secret voting. So, for. Who for? Okay. Against. Against. Against.
What?
0. Abstaining. 0. So 14 for, yes?
Now it's official.
Thus, the voting results have been approved. Based on the result of the secret ballot, the Dissertation Council of the Al-Farabi Kazakh National University in the Dissertation Council of the Direction of Study 8D041, Business and Management, made a decision to award Kaliyev Kalijan Sagatbekovich the degree of the Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, in the specialty 6D 050900 Finance. Kalijan Sagatbekovich, on behalf of the Dissertation Council, I congratulate you on the successful defense of the dissertation and wish you good luck in future research.
Thank you so much, Arthur Gimbaba. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Bari. Thank you.
I would like to
Okay.
congratulate not only Kalijan, but also his academic advisor, Professor Nurmakhanova.
Sure.
And last but not least, Kalijan, your parents. It's so moving that you thank them every word. So I think they should be quite happy today. Please pass to them our regards and congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Polishuk. Thank you so much. I will do.
Many congratulations, Kalijan.
Professor, so much thankful. You know that I'm very thankful.
Yeah, you.
Okay. At this meeting, the Dissertation Council for the Defense of the Doctoral Dissertation of Kalijan Sagatbekovich declared closed.